Welcome to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. It's Tuesday, October 7th, 2008. My understanding is that Councilmember Wisar will not be joining us today, and that Councilmember Weiss is on his way down. It's about 2:15, so that we get started. We don't have any appointments today. For those of you in the audience, let me just run through the agenda real fast. We do have a card on item number 1, I guess. Okay. Well, the items that are on consent, see no cards, are items number 4, number 6, number 7. We'll move to continue to October 28th. Item 8 is consent. 9 will move for approval, see no cards. 10, we will continue for 30 days. 11A and B are special. We do have a report from our director, Gail Goldberg. Welcome. So that takes care of the consent and the continuing items. Number 2, see no cards. We'll refer number 2 to the city's green team, consisting of various city agencies, including planning, Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety, Department of Environmental Affairs, as created by Ordinance number 179820. Number 3, we will refer to the Planning Department.
Okay.
Number 5. We can approve, and we'll run this through again once Councilmember Weiss gets here, but I didn't want to keep you waiting. But number 5, we will approve the CEO report recommending $226,995 from the Construction Services Trust Fund be allocated to Los Angeles Fire Department to purchase various capital equipment and expense items. That's number 5. Number 9, we will move to approve. See no cards. So I think we've covered most of the items, haven't we, Roberto?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so welcome, Director Goldberg, and it's good to hear you and have you here with us.
Thank you. I wanted to begin by talking a little about the APA, the American Planning Association Conference that was recently held in Hollywood. This was a state conference for APA, and it is the first time that the American Planning Association has come to LA since 1986. And we had record attendance. More than 2,000 planners from across the state came to Hollywood to the Renaissance Hotel. We had 25 panels that included LA council members, planning commissioners, and planning staff. This is a record. Both Council Member Reyes and Council Member Wisar participated in a panel on how Vista Hermosa Park became the solution for the Belmont Learning Center, or the complex. And we also wanted to particularly thank Council Member Reyes for being our keynote speaker at our annual Diversity Summit at our conference. We also had involvement from Councilmember Perry, Councilmember Garcetti's staff, and Planning Commissioners Jane Usher and Michael Wu. More than 40 planners from the department volunteered, and the response from planners across the state was fabulous. They loved seeing the revitalization not only of Hollywood, but on their mobile workshops, seeing what we were doing throughout the city. And we did want to tell you that APA is coming back to Los Angeles for our national conference in 2012. So we are on deck for a national conference, and we're going to start working on it within a few years.
Hopefully most of us will still be around.
I expect we will. I expect we will. I also wanted to let you know, as I have been talking a bit about our TOD planning. As you know, we got some grant money to do 10 TOD district plans, and we have finally just very recently signed contracts for 7 of those plans. And the 2 consultant teams, IBI and MIG, are going to be working on the 4 stops along the Expo line and the 3 along the Gold line. I also wanted to report on the department's hiring and promotions. As you know, we've been talking about bringing in 60 new people. We began our process last week when we promoted 6 city planners to senior city planners, and those 6 new seniors are John Foreman, Lynn Harper, Kevin Keller, Faisal Roble, Jim Tokunaga, and David Weintraub, and we're really pleased about that. So 6 down and 54 to go. I also wanted to mention, we've talked a bit about our 12-to-2 process, and one of the important components of streamlining our case processing is creating a computer system that will be used by all departments in the city to review projects, to monitor, create the conditions, and then to track the sign-off. And the first phase of that is up and running right now. We've finished beta testing, and the planning department is, as phase 1, all of the projects that are only the planning department, we will be doing them on this system for the next month, and over the next 3 months, other departments will be trained and will be integrated into the system, and we believe that's going to make a huge difference, not just for the development community, but in terms of creating a more transparent system that community members can access and follow. So we're very pleased about that.
Great. It's good to hear the progress, and it was a good experience at the APA conference. It's good to see that there's more to the city than just a big bowl of smog. There's so much that's happening here, and it's good to have that type of interaction with the planners from throughout the country. Congratulations, and I want to thank the planners who volunteered. It's a great way to learn more about what happens in other cities, and the networking process is just tremendous, so thank you so much.
Thank you. I think LA has a lot to be proud of, and it's a fun opportunity for us to show off some of the great things that we as a city are accomplishing.
Great, Director Goldberg. Any questions from my colleague? Councilman Jack Weiss has joined us.
Thanks for coming to breakfast this morning.
I would like to mention that this morning I attended a really fabulous breakfast where we talked about the recent RAND report that was done in terms of looking at some citywide solutions for traffic congestion. But the focus this morning was a study that was done recently by David Granis that talked about real implementation measures that could be taken in the west part of our city, in West LA, that could really make a difference in terms of relieving traffic congestion. And it was a very exciting morning, and the enthusiasm from all of us, I think. And this was something that was initiated by Councilmember Weiss, and I think we are all very pleased.
Great.
Well, since I'm responding to the director's comments, that puts it before us, and I want you to know, Mr. Chair, that about 8 months ago, we commissioned David Granis, who's a well-known transportation policy person,
right,
and a bunch of other folks, to do a study of what could be implemented now on the west side with respect to traffic, separate and apart from major infrastructure improvements. And we have a report which we're going to provide to you and a briefing which we'll get for you. But in a couple things, because I think you like this stuff.
You like this stuff, okay.
You do, man. Number one, use the data that is collected by Caltrans on freeway on and off ramps and on the freeways themselves. There's a bunch of data, how quickly cars are entering and exiting, how quickly they're going, but actually use the data to control the speed of the cars and get them going at 45 miles an hour on our local freeways, which is the optimal speed to maximize throughput. And there's just some really simple
just to keep it moving
technology you can use to keep them moving there, no faster, no slower. And secondly, to do much the same thing with the city's underlying traffic data that the city has, that it has the data but it's not using it right now. Third, to integrate the Caltrans data with the city data so that fourth, you could provide to the public at any moment real-time traffic snapshots that they could see on their screen and decide where they want to go and adjust accordingly.
Right.
And we also talked about what we're doing in Century City, which is an employer and building owner provided shuttle model that we're going to roll out, green vehicles, things like that. They're all doable now, and the director was there. It was great to have you.
Great. Hopefully we can have maybe a presentation to DOT committee and see how much they can carry in the policy. So that would be great.
That's a good idea.
Councilman Weiss, we did run through the agenda really fast, so let me do that so we can submit them as a committee report. Number 2, we refer to the city's green team. Number 3, we refer to the planning department. 4 was consent. 5, we approved consent. The CA report, we are recommending the sum amount to the fire department to purchase various capital equipment and expense items. Number 6, we have consent. 7, we continue to October 28th. 8, we can move on consent. 9, we can approve. 10, we can continue for 30 days. We just heard from our director for 12. What we have in front of us, I think that's running the table. We do have a card on item number 1. So let's take care of item number 1. And quite frankly, this is a planning verbal report from Tom Rothman on the issue of, and Roberto, I don't want to take away your job.
It's Councilman, item 1 is a motion-wise rule. It's directing the planning department to prepare a report on the feasibility of drafting a citywide ridgeline protection ordinance. And this was previously referred to the department 2 years ago.
Thank you, Roberto. Tom, can you give us the Reader's Digest version?
Sure. Good afternoon, committee members. Tom Rothman from the Code Studies section of the Planning Department. I'm here today to update you on the department's progress on protecting the city's ridgelines. Currently, the department has very stringent ridgeline protections in place within the Mulholland Scenic Parkway specific plan and the San Gabriel Verdugo Mountains specific plan. Additionally, on August 14th, the City Planning Commission approved the Northeast Los Angeles Hillside's work program, which proposes ridgeline protections for many areas of Northeast LA. While these 3 plans address ridgeline issues specific to those communities, the department is also surveying all of the city's ridgelines in tandem with the city's mansionization ordinance that we will be expanding into all of the hillside areas. The Hillside Mansionization Ordinance will be proposing base citywide ridgeline protections that can be further restricted through the community or specific plan process.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Rothman. We have several cards on this. We have item number 1, Barbara Nichols, Jose Aguilar, and Donald Lowe's. So, Barbara Nichols, please come on up. As you come on up, give us your name and address, and please keep an eye on those 2 minutes that are right there.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Hi, my name is Barbara Nichols. I live in Benedict Canyon, District 5. I'm a former president of the Benedict Canyon Homeowners Association. I was very instrumental working with several others on the council in getting the retaining wall ordinance passed. We are very anxious to get a mansionization ordinance passed for the hillside and very anxious to have a ridgeline ordinance passed. We are being subjected to the mega mansions that are completely mutilating our ridgelines. Once they're lost forever. I know all of you came into public service with the public welfare in mind and doing good for the community. This is one thing we must pass. It is just critical. We're destroying the beauty of LA. There are places that can be built, houses can be built lower on the hillsides and still accomplish housing and development. A number of these large developers are building spec properties. Some of them are half-built, then they lose their money and stop construction. We're left with these colossal eyesores, and there's no way to replace the hillside. I ask you to give this consideration and to speed this through the process so we can get this passed before we have no more ridgelines to protect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Aguilar?
How you doing? My name is Jose Aguilar. I'm a contributor to The Voice. One of the issues that I have, we have something that's extremely similar in the Northeast, is the Northeast Hillside Ordinance. And I would like to tell this board that we were summarily disrespected because we had the planning department try to depict the ordinance with Play-Doh and Lego blocks. I have the newspaper to prove it. Also, there was also outrage with some of the draconian restrictions that goes along with this ordinance in the hillsides. So I'm going to pass this newspapers out to the commissioners here. And what I'm trying to figure out is this: what level of respect does this city council have with people in the Northeast? Do they think we're uneducated? Do they think that we can't figure this out? As a matter of fact, we have an Sereno, a professional architect professor, actually made this resolution. He was able to discern the ordinance for what it is. And it's called Attachment A. And I'm going to submit it, called the ridgeline designation is too severe and should be overlaid with the current ICO interim control ordinance map to ensure only the tops of the hills are considered. But what's happening here is that the tops of the hills are not only being considered, everywhere else in El Sereno is being considered, over 15,000 homes. And what is the purpose? What are you doing as far as the economic impact with property value of those people? I understand the hilltops, I understand they need protection, but why the rest of the hills? What are you doing as far as property value? How is this ordinance going to create an economic impact towards the property owners? As right now we see that property are being depreciated exponentially. What will this ordinance do with property value? This is something that I want you to consider because, believe it or not, it's through property value that you get your taxes paid through market value. So if the market value collapses, there's less property taxes for you. So I would like to submit this also.
Just for information, Mr. Aguilar, that whole issue of economic impacts will be coming before us in November. So that's something that we'll be having those discussions with the community. So.
Could you also address the Lego blocks and the Play-Doh? Don't ever do this in public again. That's what I'm asking. Oh.
Right. That was your 2 minutes, Mr. Aguilar.
I would like to submit to the chair. This is a Channel 34 report concerning that same meeting in the newspaper. I'd like to submit this to the chair. News report.
So just to be clear, the assertions being made that by using Lego blocks, we were insulting the community?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, this is something like does it give you like broad examples using Play-Doh and
you,
Lego
Mr.
blocks?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Donald Rose. And then we'll have Reuben Chavez, and that'll close the committee.
I'm Donald Lowe's. I live at 2037 Benedict Canyon Drive. I speak for myself. The Bel Air Beverly Crest Neighborhood Council and Benedict Canyon Association. I'm here rather excited today to see that this issue has been been resurrected from purgatory, where it's been for 2.5 years. We're very pleased Ms. Goldberg's come to us in the interim. And this is an issue that has been languishing unnecessarily. The same issues that you were forwarding on are the same issues that were requested 2.5 years ago. It seems illogical that we need another 60 days to bring forth what should have been brought forth. We understand that there's some considerations within the planning department to link this to the master plan for mansionization, which is another 2.5 years away, and subject to the magic bullet, whether it's ever going to get there. We don't think that should happen. As long as there's an opportunity to recommend other features that should go with this, we'd like Ms. Goldberg and the committee to finally recognize that there's a disconnect between the planning department and the grading department, who likes to dish out their approvals before anybody gets any opportunity to put in plans. And we're rather discouraged by seeing our hills carted away by trash trucks, essentially destroying the roads that we've asked that be built, rebuilt. They're tearing away our infrastructures, and those need to be coordinated. We hope that in your considerations you'll do that. This is a very important issue. 60 days shouldn't be necessary after 2.5 years, and we'd like to get it moving forward quickly. Thank you for being here, and thanks for getting it going. Thanks for coming to town, Ms. Goldberg.
Thank you very much. Reuben Chavez, our final speaker.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm a little nervous, so please bear with me. I'm going to read a prepared statement. Attachment A, Ad Hoc Land Use Committee position. Although the LA 32 Neighborhood Council agrees with the concepts, goals, and objectives of this Hillside Ordinance, including appropriate scale, minimum disruptiveness to natural terrain, vegetation, watercourses, and wildlife, preservation of current neighborhood charter, and insurance of adequate infrastructure on our hillsides, and have prevention of current neighborhood character and insurance of adequate infrastructure, that's my dyslexia, sorry about that, and have supported open space and environmental issues previously. We cannot support the new Hillside Ordinance as written for the following reasons. Number one, the ridgeline designation is too severe and should be overlaid with the current ICO interim control ordinance, mapped to ensure only the tops of the hillsides or hills are considered. Number two, the FAR floor area ratio should be based on a lot of square footage and not topographically lot slope, the way is which the FAR or FAR is derived in the new ordinance, and the minimum square footage allowed is not concurrent in which with current hillside housing trends and unrealistic in today's housing market. Number three, the reduction in height of the retaining walls to 6 foot high retaining walls for the maximum of 12 feet does not consider the actual severity of the nature of the actual hillside is too limiting. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chavez, if you'd like to submit what you have in writing to the clerk, so make sure we get all of your recommendations on the record.
Thank you very much.
You can pass it forward to Barbara. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Chavez. You did great. All right. That concludes item number 1. And I did inadvertently leave out the speaker card for item number 12. So, Mr. Weiss, you had a speaker card for the report from our director.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Ms. Goldberg, thank you for coming. I think that Mr. Reyes has this as a regular item, and it's good that you come just to hear the public, even if you don't have a report. And if you're not here, maybe you should send one of your representatives. But on this issue of traffic that you had mentioned, I think there's a concern because, for example, in Ms. Gruhl's district in Valley Village.
Mr. Weiss, why don't you address the committee?
Okay, I will address the committee, thank you. With regard to, I'm just addressing where I think the power is, but that's okay. No, just kidding. The issue is relative to traffic mitigation in Ms. Gruhl's district in Valley Village. There is a severe problem with these SB 1818 projects that are going in by, in particular, the speculator Scheffel and perhaps some other speculators. Ms. Gruhl introduced a motion, it passed the council, basically requiring the planning department and the Department of Transportation to get together and come up with a way to evaluate the cumulative impact of these projects. That motion passed in February. It's now October. I would expect that the planning department should be in a position to come forth with recommendations. Number two, with regard to traffic mitigation, why not update the 21-year-old parking congestion map that the city apparently still uses? There was litigation, fortunately in favor of the city in response to that. The developer pretended to rely on it, and we could basically save ourselves a lot of time and trouble with regard to that. Third, it's important, the AB 283 is still the law. I would like the planning department to state on the record for the public to know whether or not, or the committee to require the planning department to request on the record, are they implementing 283 with regard to their evaluation of these SB 1818 projects? That's a very important consideration, Mr. Reyes and Mr. Weiss, and Ms. Goldberg, because there are instances in this city, and I'm challenging every neighborhood council to basically undertake this as an effort on its own part, to find what I call the AB 283 misses. There are tons of them, and we will be able to document in the case of the project that is in Ms. Gruhl's district where that occurred. But I believe they're all over, and I think it's important relative to the planning department stating if they do or if they don't.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes.
That takes care of those particular items. And we do have a second on all the agenda we went through there, Councilman Weiss. And so we'll have, now before us, item number 11.
Yes, Councilman, item 11A and 11B are interrelated. 11A is a zone change, and 11B is a track map. It relates to an 18-lot, single-family subdivision in CD2.
Before we go on, Councilmember, to 11A and 11B, what was the action on item number 1?
On item number 1?
Yes.
That we simply request the planning to report on the feasibility of drafting a citywide resident protection ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Roberto, that?
Yes, Councilman, I just read item 11A and 11B. 11A is a zone change and 11B is a track map for an 18-lot subdivision in CD2.
Okay.
Chairman Reyes, Councilman Weiss, my name is Michael Young with the City Planning Department, Division of Land. What's before you is two cases. One has to do with tentative track 60461-1A, now it's 2A, and a zone change. The project itself is an 18-lot subdivision on 4.76 acre site. Originally, they had requested 20 lots. We had reviewed it and we looked at the approval of 18 lots based upon the zone change. The site itself has two land use designations, one low and the other one very low too. In that regards, the zone change reflected that. The zone change itself is consistent with the general plan and the community plan. Originally, they had filed a zone variance that was denied, sustained by the North Valley Area Planning Commission. What is recommended that this body do and full City Council is that the zone change as filed RA to R1 be denied and approve a zone change from RA to TQRS on the 4.7 acre site. Again, as I indicated, the property itself is, the zone change is consistent with the general plan and the community plan. In regards to the project itself, one private street is proposed. BOE indicated the alignment originally on Ellen Bogan was inappropriate and they had redesigned the project. However, a revised map is still needed. The decision on the tentative tract took into consideration the prevailing densities in the particular area, as well as the two zones and the two land use designations, access to the lots, Bureau of Engineering's input on the private streets, the entitlements, horsekeeping, San Gabriel, Verdugo Mountain, Scenic Preservation Specific Plan, implementation of the community plan. At the North Valley Area Planning Commission on June 19, the North Valley Area Planning Commission granted an appeal in part by adding conditions 28 to 32, which includes the horsekeeping. Condition number 33 was a revised map. 34 to 36 took into consideration a bio-study that was done and included 34 as for plants, endangered plants, 35 reptiles and mammals, 36 for birds, as well as adding condition number 21G, which is an indemnification condition. When the determination was done by staff, inadvertently conditions 28, 29 regarding horsekeeping was not included in the determination. What I submitted to the city clerk as well as the councilman was determinations that addressed that situation, as well as in the tract and zone change. The commission also sustained the action of the Deputy Advisory Agency and approved the tentative tract for 18 lots, modified the conditions of approval by adding those as I indicated, and adopted the findings in the environmental. Subsequent to the North Valley Area Planning Commission determination, an appeal was filed. And some of the points that was made, I will address it now as well as my response to those comments. One of the comments was spot zoning. Spot zoning is not a situation in this particular matter. The zoning, the underlying zoning is consistent with the plan. The zone change is consistent with the plan. They had talked about a wildlife corridor. The wildlife corridor was not indicated in the general plan. They talked about a CEQA evaluation, and in that regards, a bio-study was done to address the wildlife, the plants, and the mammals, birds. They talked about Angeles Forest Lands. This site is under private ownership, and as such, they have a right to develop the piece of property. And the general plan allows the proposed development. Again, they did talk about the wildlife corridor and did comment about that. 100-year floodplain was also mentioned. Bureau of Engineering and Building and Safety provided input. The conditions that was stipulated was in regards to their input. They also talked about an earthquake risk. Building and Safety considers during the building permit process the earthquake situation. Another comment was made that there was sensitive environmental area. The M&D adequately addressed the environmental concerns that the neighborhood had, and that's the reason why a biological study was done. Our environmental staff went through and considered that the M&D was adequate. Another comment that was made was that this was a dead man's corner in the number of accidents. I believe that DOT reviewed the document, provided some of their recommendations, which became conditions, and also the M&D included some of those concerns as mitigations. Bureau of Engineering provided their comments as dedication and improvement, so that should address that situation. Another comment was, again, horsekeeping. Conditions 28 to 32 were imposed addressing those situations, and it is incorporated into the document itself. There were no variants of CUP filed or required regarding horsekeeping. They talked about zone change. Again, zone change is allowed by the general plan, land use designation. They also mentioned about the specific plan, the Verdugo Mountains, San Gabriel specific plan, that development is allowed by the specific plan. They also mentioned wetlands. This area is not designated as a wetlands in the general plan. They indicate the area retained as a watershed. The land use designation and the zone change allows the development. They talked about the illegally haul of dirt, and that's an issue that Building and Safety addressed. And the bio study did address the endangered animals, plants, and species as conditions. Conditions 34 to 36 talked about the plants, mammals, and birds. Again, they talk about whether or not it was consistent with the general plan. The zoning is consistent with the general plan. And the land use designation, as they also brought up, and again, there were two land use designations, low, very low. For your information, low allows RE9, RS, R1, RU, RD5, RD6. The request here is RS. The other portion of the property is very low 2, and very low 2 allows RE15, RE11. The underlying zone RA is consistent with the plan and will remain as such with one lot. In concluding, it is recommended that you deny the appeal, sustain the action of the North Valley Area Planning Commission in approving tentative tract 60461-2A, modify the conditions of approval incorporating the missing conditions, adopt the findings and the environmental MND, recommend that council approve tentative tract 60461-2A with the changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. We do have several cards on this item, but I did want to ask Building and Safety, addressing 11A and 11B, like to come forward. The Building and Safety here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Dave Lara with Building and Safety.
Okay, we just heard from Planning Department, their report, the Planning Commission's deliberation, the recommendation, but we're taking 11A and B together so we can hear the public comment for both items. There were some questions asked as to the condition of the property and some of the concerns raised with the whole dynamic of bringing in earth from other places and where it was placed and how it was placed and whether it's compacted or not, and a lot of issues there that came to our attention, and we wanted to understand what was the role of Building and Safety, what's the status, and what's the position being taken right now.
Earlier this springtime, we were investigating this site because of various violations. There was initially a complaint about illegal grading. Come to find out that...
Can you speak in the microphone a little closer?
I'm terribly sorry. Thank you. And we had in fact found that there had been some dumping of dirt in various locations throughout the property. There was dirt in an area where we believe may have been a natural water course, but yet that's still somewhat to be established. At this time, we have in fact issued orders to comply on the property. We have our inspector here, as a matter of fact, Mr. Greg Stevens, who's the investigator on the project. And at this time, we're still currently, the project is currently under investigation, although the owners of the property have in fact submitted information and applications for plan check for grading for this property, but that's yet to be evaluated by the department. It's the intention of the department to follow through and make sure that the property does come into compliance fully with all the grading code requirements.
Okay, so we have two tracks here. Before us is a zoning matter, and the matters that you are addressing are enforcement activity, correct?
That's correct.
And so the owners who have a requirement and a legal obligation to follow the city process and how they treat their land is different than the zoning element of what's before us.
They are two separate items, yes, sir.
Okay, but currently we are in a position to address the necessary responsibilities of the owner aside from the zoning. So I'm saying the same thing 3 different ways.
That's correct. We
Okay.
can, in fact, keep them on 2 separate tracks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions, my colleague? Okay. All right, that being said, we will hear from the appellant first. And we have with us Elaine Brown, the appellant.
Good afternoon. My name is Elaine Brown, and I live in Sullen. Do you want my address? I have just handed in a letter which I think I may have given to you before. We were unsure, but it is a reversal of the neighborhood council on this issue as to the zoning. They originally understood that the only thing they could do is RS zoning in lieu of the RA, and they have come to learn about this property, and they regret their decision, and they have turned in a letter. They wrote a letter in the beginning of August to reverse their original position. This property is zoned RA, and I'm not going to argue it at this point in time. I do feel it's very significant due to inconsistencies in the land use designation in Chapter 3 of the General Plan. I do want to talk, however, about the wildlife corridor and the fact that the city and the county designated as a significant ecological area. This is the open space that smart growth was meant to save. Infill is not supposed to go into our open spaces. This is along the Big Tahunga Wash. It's within 87 feet of the wash at one point, at the closest point. All of it is in a scenic corridor plan. Mr. Young just said that the scenic corridor plan has been signed off on, so there's no project permit compliance review. However, we just a few hours ago went into internal tracking. There is no SPP number. There is no indication it's ever been signed off. I spoke to Katie Peterson and to Claudia Rodriguez, who are the administrators, the city planning deputies who administrate this plan. They know nothing about a sign-off. It has not been brought to them, even though the advisory agency staff requested it in the findings to the North Valley Area Planning Commission. I am very concerned about the fact that as I have worked to save this property, we have learned it's a wildlife corridor. There have been 2 sightings within the last year. On June 8th of 2008, 3 people up in a residential area where a mobile park is located were confronted by a black cougar or puma or mountain lion. May I go on? Or?
Please.
Approximately a year ago in November, our wildlife representative documented and photographed puma tracks right across Oro Vista in the 9-acre park. The bioassessment people, Christopher Joseph, claimed that they looked at overhead maps. However, when we look at overhead maps, we can see tracks coming off the hill and through the property and through the culvert. That culvert is not being used at this time because it's been fenced off, and we have pumas now that are wandering around in the neighborhood because they can't go through their normal corridor. It's a narrowing space there. There is some hope that we can get at least 50 feet of it for taken off the front of the property for a wildlife corridor, but I would like to remind the Planning and Land Use Management Committee that wildlife corridors are generally at a minimum of 500 feet. I've said it all in the appeal. This property should not be developed. I don't know what else to say to you. If you've read the appeal and looked at the pictures, you know we're developing a piece of wilderness and a buffer between civilization and the wilderness. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Thank you for making the time. We do want to offer the applicant a response if you'd like to at this time, or wait towards the end, because I'm going to go through several cards here. Mr. Thrush, do you want to wait till the end as well? Okay, so we'll, and I'm assuming Arthur Slonian. Okay. We have Karen Zimmerman with us, Electra Kruger, Paul Edelman, and I believe it's John Louis. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Please keep your eye on the clock for the 2 minutes.
Okay. My name is Karen Zimmerman. I live on the eastern edge of CD2 in the north, and I'm here today speaking on behalf of my husband, myself, our family, and our neighbors. One of the things we're very fortunate about up in our area is the amount of open space and wildlife areas that have been preserved, and I thank our city councilwoman for that. She's been very aggressive in trying to bundle together parcels to retain some of that, because most of our city has lost that, and it makes these areas all the more crucial that we preserve them. We have spoken with the city on numbers of occasions about parcels, particularly ones that form important buffers, the buffers that separate development from these wildlife areas, such as the Verdugo Hills Golf Course as well as Oro Vista, which if you look at a map using Google or Google Earth, you can see exactly where that is in relation to all of the wildlife corridor. Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy has very strongly emphasized this fact, the fact that it is a wildlife corridor. If we lose those corridors, if we give up these buffer areas, we continue the risk, which just recent studies have shown, a great decline in wildlife. What are we leaving for our children and grandchildren? In fact, my husband and I are going to be grandparents in December, so it'll be our first grandchild. We really want to make sure that's what left behind gives them something that is the earth instead of paving over everything. This is dollars and cents maybe for the developers, but it's quality of life and our planet. And that sounds like a huge exaggeration, but as we nibble away more and more, we have less left. So please seriously consider looking out for us.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Electra Kruger.
Yes, my name is Electra Kruger. I'm the current president of the Shadow Hills Property Owners Association, and we do support the Sunland Tujunga community in their opposition to the Oro Vista development as it is proposed now. Oro Vista has at times been incorrectly described as an infill development. It is not an infill. It is surrounded on three sides by either open space or agriculture or rural agriculturally zoned properties in the Tujunga Wash Plain. Higher density residential properties are located only to the south, adjacent to the city of Sunland. As such, the Oro Vista development must serve at the very least as a transitional buffer from that higher density area of the city of Sunland and the open space of the Tujunga Wash and the Angeles National Forest that lies to the north. The general plan and community plan both speak to the preservation and even expansion of equestrian properties where feasible, and how much more feasible can you get than being adjacent to the Tujunga Wash floodplain and the Angeles National Forest. The general plan policies of use and density 3.5.4 do require that new developments in special use neighborhoods such as water-oriented, rural agricultural, and equestrian communities retain the predominant and distinguishing characteristics, and all these characteristics are a part of this property. And for that reason, again, we do oppose the zone change. General plan policy of use and density 6.1.2b speaks to preserving habitat linkages where feasible to provide wildlife corridors and to protect national
Thank you, Ms. Kruger.
natural
Thank you very
ranges.
much. Paul Edelman, then John Louis. After John Louis, Noel Weiss.
Honorable members, Paul Edelman with the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. Just to consider the context of this property by the Tujunga Wash, how significant it is. If you look at the first graphic that I have that passed out to you, it shows the context of the project and this choke point along Tujunga Wash and how it's next to other public lands and that it's really a key piece of property in the city. I think the problem is that people are looking at this issue as a little bit too black and white in this room, and I may be the only one that's going to come up with some sort of compromise. And I believe that in fairness to the city and in fairness to the applicant, there should be some contribution of open space from this project. Otherwise, it's wall-to-wall houses and next to one of the treasures of the city, ecologically and visually. You can just see how beautiful that view corridor is there along the south side of the wash. At a minimum, There's been some talk about a 50-foot setback, and that's what I mentioned at the last Plum hearing. We are the third graphic, the second 11 by 17 in your package. We recommend a 0.65 acre setback area for a habitat buffer, for a wildlife corridor, for trail corridor, and for a viewshed corridor. I've carefully put a lot of thought into this, and obviously it could be moved and here and there a little bit, but that this should be the absolute minimum that we hope, the Conservancy hopes, that we come out of this hearing with. If Plum decides to deny the project because of its inadequate CEQA for both not covering the illegal dumping, the viewshed, indirect biological impact lack, no open space element in the city general plan, let's at least get this rather than having a big housing development right next to a treasured ecological area within the city. Ideally, this would have to be a fee simple dedication to either the city or to the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority. A conservation easement won't work here unless there's a big papering of the applicant saying that they voluntarily will accept that as a condition. So fee simple, and we hope that if you need justification or nexus, consider the CEQA deficiency, the grading violations, and the overarching aspect of this project fitting onto that site.
Thank you, Mr. Edelman.
Thank you.
Okay, John Louis. And then Noel Weiss.
Yes, my name's John Lowy, and 11063 Eldora Place in Sunland. I live a stone's throw from this property, and I just want to start by saying I've talked to more than 100 of my neighbors, and there's not one person that's in favor of this project. You are clearly going against the will of the people who live in that neighborhood. If you do approve this project, all you need to do is look at this map to see that this is the entrance to a natural area, and it has no business being built in this location. There are also the illegal dumping. You tried to separate the issues, but I see them as directly connected. The illegal dumping took place the week before the biological assessment was going to happen, and it's obviously a disregarding and disrespecting the city to do something like that. I also think that the location, this location is critical to the future of the city. There's going to be a city park across the street. There's already lots of national forest, and this project is not in the best interest of the city as well as not in the best interest of the neighborhood. It is in a floodplain. There's going to have to be many feet of fill put in there in order to be able to build houses on it. And I think a much better alternative is to look like the gentleman before me and other people. This needs to be parkland. It needs to be preserved, not built on. This is in the interest of one person, the developer who's going to make money off this project. We have many homes in Sunland that are not inhabited right now because they've lost their mortgage. We do not need more houses right now. We need more parkland. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowy. Noel Weiss.
Thank you. Members, from the sound of this, it sounds like we're talking about a discretionary action by this committee, by the city, which reflects really a policy determination by the city council member, Ms. Gruhl. Now, from the discussion that was held, my understanding is the planning department said this isn't a wildlife corridor because somehow it's not formally designated as such. That's like the city saying in our parking congested cases, well, there's no parking congestion because the 20-year-old parking congestion map says it's not parking congested. I think there are sufficient facts on the record to demonstrate that, in effect, as a matter of fact, that it is a wildlife sanctuary, that it fits within the criteria, and that the exercise of discretion by the city should be in favor of the policy. And again, it comes down to what this council values, what Ms. Gruhl values, what her policy judgment is, what the policy judgment of the council as a whole is. Do we value the speculation, or do we value basically other things? We had a big debate today about water. We value water. We like the buildings. We want to protect the environment. So now we have a particular choice to be made. And I think there's an issue here, again, going back to AB 283. The zoning has to reflect the general plan. Is there consistency or is there not consistency? Really, there has been no indication in the record whatsoever that any kind of AB 283, still the law of the state of California, still binding on this city, whether or not that kind of review, thorough, thoughtful, detailed, has been undertaken. the record is, from what I understand, basically blank on that regard. It seems as though, at a minimum, the discretion being the better part of valor, that either the application, the appeal be upheld, or the matter that the applicant be made to demonstrate why that this is consistent, more particularly with the overall general plan, so that essentially we're making a policy choice here that is more people-oriented as opposed to speculator-oriented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Next, we'd like to have Mr. Resnick or Arthur Azlonian.
Dear council persons and members of the Planning and Land Use Committee, my name is Arthur Arslanian. I represent the project, and I'm the managing member of the developer. Thank you for hearing our case today. I was born in Hollywood, California, and I lived here locally all my life. I am a small business owner. I stand here today somewhat concerned regarding the proceedings that have taken place in the last 5 years for this project, especially since I completely redesigned this project to fit the request of the neighborhood council. I am disturbed over all the appellant's remarks about this project and what has taken place so far. I can't help but wonder how many jobs have been lost while this project has been delayed. Troubling more is how many other projects have been sidelined due to the current financial crisis that is gripping the city of Los Angeles, American people, and now the world. We need jobs. You see, when projects like these are commenced, people from all parts of the country are engaged, from design architects, engineers, and consultants to skilled labor and factories that produce raw materials like lumber and concrete. All those people then go out and shop for food for their families, see movies, eat at restaurants, buy cars, clothes, and further create secondary jobs and ultimately keep the entire American system moving. At the moment, we are heading backwards and fast. Thousands are losing their jobs already in banking, construction, retail, and soon all industries will suffer, including municipalities. With the utmost respect to the persons objecting in this room, I can only bet someone dear to them is affected negatively by the current economic climate, either financially or physically from stress. I don't suppose the appellants should have used the same vigilance in petitioning Congress and their elected officials to stop the loose lending practices of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which has created this severe recession, bankrupted the largest institutions, and wreaked havoc worldwide. Thank you for listening to me today.
So, Stoney, let me ask you one question. There are significant issues regarding the dumping and concerns with building and safety and the whole notion of what's being followed or not followed by city rules and regulations based on building and safety's concerns. I understand our role here from a zoning capacity, but on the other hand, I see this conduct, this behavior that really raises the question, who's following the rules and why are these issues being raised by building and safety?
I'm glad you mentioned that, Councilman Reyes. As you can see, the property is not in the main part of the city. It's at the end of a block. And as a result of that, we have been targets for illegal dumping and trespassing from the community and from local construction projects. In fact, the illegal dumping that took place, from what I can understand now as I've done my research, in April, there was a Department of Water and Power lot up the street on Big Tujunga Canyon, which was accepting dirt on the behalf of the city of LA, and as a result, some of the drivers did not want to pay to dump there, so they were dumping on our property. Now, as to the dumping and the current conditions, we are taking steps. As of April, we've submitted grading plans to the city of Los Angeles to mitigate the concerns regarding the grading department and building and safety issues, and we've also applied for a haul route to bring any amount of dirt into the site that will be required by the building and safety or the IBC code. As to the dirt itself, we have an approved soil report that those types of measures get taken care of during construction. I don't see it as a matter that needs to be concerned with right now. It's not going to be forgotten. It will be addressed during the actual building of the houses. And, what can I say? It's a 5-acre site. It's difficult to fence off, and people were dumping on it. As far as the code enforcement is concerned, I was with the city just this week, actually. I spoke to Mike Smith, and we've addressed the issues, and he is aware of all the plans that have been submitted to the city and has brought the property into compliance with the Building and Safety Code enforcement. And I have not heard anything back from the actual initial violations in April since we submitted those plans and did what we were supposed to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes, Mr. Weiss, Ben Resnick, with Jeffrey Mangels representing Mr. Aslanian. This is a project, members of the committee, we're in our 6th year. It started much bigger. It was 30 units, R1 lots. As you heard Mr. Aslanian say a few years ago, he finally revised it, redesigned it to comply with exactly what the neighborhood council asked for. They said minimum RS, minimum. They said minimum 7,500 square foot lots. And the project got redesigned. We're at averaging 8,000 square foot lots. We have the RS zone. We have CD2 support, at least they certainly did at the commission. And the Planning Commission, after having, again, extensive hearings, 2 hearings, approved the project, did not approve a small request we had to change a section of the property to the RS because they said it's in a different plan category. My client has dropped that request. What you have before you now is effectively a total of 18 lots. So we are, by the way, these 18 lots are now subject to the new mansionization ordinance, which means the lot coverage is rather small, the square footage is restricted. So I don't know what the Conservancy is talking about, wall-to-wall houses. Isn't that why the city adopted the mansionization ordinance? We have rules. We are into our 6th year. 3 days from now, council is supposed to take final action, and I see the Conservancy coming up with a, quote, compromise. What compromise? They want to take 15% of my client's land today, 3 days before final council action, after 6 years in the process? It's not a compromise, it's a taking. There's no nexus, there's no basis to create a wildlife corridor. If you see the photograph, the aerial photograph that I submitted with my letter a few weeks ago, here's our site. Here's Tujunga up at the top, the wash. This is the wildlife corridor. Do you see how dense everything else is to the east and south, all of these homes? The Conservancy's idea is to bring the wildlife corridor right down our property, down Ora Vista. That mountain lion, that puma that the woman talked about, we should be bringing it down into this neighborhood? Or should we be keeping it up in Big Tujunga where it belongs and staying out of the residents?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Thrush.
Good afternoon, Chairman Reyes, Councilman Weiss. My name is Dale Thrush. I'm Planning Deputy for Councilmember Wendy Gruhl.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Thrush.
Sure.
When you came to commission, how many hours of public interaction was there?
How many hours of public interaction from
During
over
the Planning Commission and your experience? I just want to get a...
This case has been going on for between 5 and 6 years. There have been numerous neighborhood council, land use committee hearings or presentations, numerous private meetings with members of the community, the council office, and the developers. I can't recall how many actual public hearings we've had, but it's been several.
Okay. Okay, so all the information before us is an accumulation of many meetings over 5 years regarding this site.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just want to put that on the record.
Now, what I'd like to start by just saying that we agree, the council office agrees with what you've heard from the appellants in terms of the inherent beauty of this location, the scenic
You
nature
speak
of
to the
it.
microphone, I can hear you better.
Sure. Is that a little better?
A lot better.
The council office agrees with the community and the appellant's concerns about losing the inherent beauty of this location. It is right on the wash. It has spectacular views of Big Tujunga Canyon. And if there was a way to preserve this property in public ownership, we would have done it. The simple fact is that we can't acquire the property at this point. I understand that there are other factions in the community who are interested in pursuing that, and I believe they will be contacting the owner, but that's kind of after the fact. The simple fact is we are without tools to stop this project at this point, and so the fact that it's been going on for some 5+ years through many iterations And starting out with 30 different lots, it's now down to 18 lots. We are compelled to agree that the zone change is consistent with the plan and is likely to be an appropriate step forward. Now, having said that, there are a number of environmental issues raised in the appeals. Mr. Young went through them in detail. I'll just highlight them. There are spot zoning issues, floodplain, earthquake, sensitive environmental area, EIR, horsekeeping, ridgeline protection. Yeah, all of those issues, I believe, have been appropriately addressed by staff. There are two issues remaining, however, that I would like to give you some additional comments about. The first is the wildlife corridor that has been addressed here in various forms today. It was raised fairly recently, I believe, in the appeal. I don't recall hearing about it before the series of appeals. So the question is, do we have a predicate or a nexus to require one? What is the appropriate nexus? And assuming that we do have that nexus, what is an appropriate wildlife corridor? I believe it was something of a surprise that I've actually found myself agreeing with Noel Weiss. He did indicate that there was a plethora of information that supports the conclusion that there is a wildlife corridor here. It's not necessary that it be in one or two documents, that the information is there, and I believe the Conservancy has presented you with maps to support that fact. And so what Councilwoman Gruhl would request is the requirement in both the zone change and the map and the track map appeal that an appropriate wildlife corridor be granted across the northwest corner of the property. Now, when I say appropriate, I mean to the satisfaction of the Planning Department, because they really are technical people and they can make the determination much better than we can. The second issue and last issue that I'd like to address is the height of structures within the scenic corridor. Section 9A of the San Gabriel Verdugo Mountain Scenic Preservation Specific Plan requires maximum height of 30 feet of structures within the corridor, the scenic corridor. We would like to have an additional either interpretation or requirement, as the city attorney would direct you, to make that measurement of 30 feet from the native soil, not from the finished grade. And so with that, unless you have further questions, I would close my remarks.
I'm hoping you have those directions in writing.
I'm sorry?
You have what you just said in writing in terms of the recommendations and...
I can provide, the actual, what I've essentially just read it, I can provide it to your staff.
Okay, so I want to make sure that's submitted, so make sure the city clerk records your recommendations. Okay, so that concludes this hearing on this matter. There is language that...
Excuse me, Mike Young for the record. Before Mr. Thurash sits down, when he talked about the wildlife corridor, I'll bring some maps. So a clarification for everybody here, maybe you can identify where he's highlighting. What we have here is the proposed track map as well as the radius map. What's indicated here in crosshatch is the applicant's proposed track, in which the red is the very low land use designation.
Mr. Young, do you mind facing this way so we can see it and let the audience see it as well?
Okay.
So can you turn it around?
Audience.
There you go. There you go.
The crosshatch area is the crosshatch area is the area that is the applicant's piece of property.
Okay.
What's shown here is the red. That red is the very low land use designation. It shall remain RA. There's no zone change proposed. The remainder of the site is proposed for the zone change. This is what was submitted, considered by the Deputy Advisory Agency as well as the North Valley Area Planning Commission. The area shown indicated in red, that's the very low land use designation. No zone change. They did file for a zone variance. That variance was denied, so the site will remain as one lot in the RA zone. Ellen Bogan will separate or provide a buffer between the RS and the RA zone.
Okay. And that's the area Mr. Thrush is alluding to.
Right, I'll let
He's saying yes.
Yes, the area in the very northwest corner of the property along Oro Vista and Big Tujunga Canyon routes.
Which is the areas consistent that Michael Young pointed out. Can we make sure we're aligning up the two areas? Mr. Thrush, can you show him what area you're talking about on the map? I want to make sure Mr. Young is consistent with your observations.
Well, that's what I'm trying to look for right now.
You just appoint you.
Okay.
So you came to arrest me.
Come on, folks, let's get on the same page.
Councilmember, just so that you know, I know you don't want to delay people. We have, Noel Weiss has a public comment on item 13 also. If it comes to the fact that you may need some time on this one.
It's okay. Thank you, Don.
Yes. It's kind of the street.
You want to explain so that they understand.
What I like to see and hear is what this committee will decide upon. I want to make sure everyone is looking at the same parcel the same way, so we don't have any indiscretions later or any challenges later. So this is the time to be very clear what the staff is recommending based on some agreements here. Now, I think that's too hard to ask. Can you please be clear?
Councilman Reyes, again, Mike Young for the records. I was confused as well as the councilman here in regards to where that location of that wildlife corridor that he had indicated. And what he had indicated to me, and it was also discussed with the applicant and the applicant representative, and it had to do with this corner right here.
Mike, we have to get you more staff so someone can help you hold your board. Is there anyone from your shop here? Anybody from the planning department here that can help on Mr. Young?
There's an easel right there.
Okay, planners, we got to back each other up here.
So thank you. Building and safety is always appreciated. Okay, thank you.
Jesus.
What was discussed here by the representative from the council office as well as with the applicant and the applicant representative was somewhere along in this vicinity is where the wildlife corridor. And so what I think would be greatly appreciated by all, including myself, because we need to have something definitive as well as in the track and the zone change, that when this item goes to council on Friday, a map will be provided showing where that corridor will be so that everybody understands where it is located, the width, and so forth.
So is it safe to say it's in the general area that we see on this map? Want to take this, Mr. Young?
Okay, hang on.
Not exactly the same dimensions, but is that the general area we're talking about?
Dale Thrush for Council District 2. Yes, Councilman Reyes, that is the general location of what we're proposing. It's just
Okay.
less extensive than is being proposed.
And that's important to say because it's a very different than what was being shown before. Just generally speaking, I'm not saying dimensions, I'm not saying exact characteristics, but that's the general area. Okay, so I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So by the time this comes to council, everyone's in agreement between the staff of the planning department, the council office of the respective district, and the applicant of what we are talking about is clear. Okay. Mr. Resnick.
Sorry, I have to, being told to sit while my client's property is being taken away left and right. Can we put a cap as to the number of square feet being taken on that corner? Because I've seen different maps. The one they're pointing to from the Conservancy goes all the way down over.
I understand, Mr. Resnick. What I was saying is, by the time they get to council, the exact numbers that indicate the specific area will be made clear.
Okay. And then the other thing, for the first time today, we heard, although I heard it this morning from Dale, about the height limit question. I'd like to have 30 seconds to address that.
Please.
The specific plan limits all houses in that area to 30 feet. Dale is right. But the specific plan says per Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 1203. 1203 are your definitional sections. It defines how you measure height, how you measure finished grade. For us to do anything else is to ask for an exception to the specific plan. It's inappropriate, it's not possible, it's not what we've asked for. You can't do it by interpretation, you can't do it as a condition. As is, as I said, the houses are limited to 30 feet, and they're limited by mansionization ordinance. They're not going to be very large. They have to have all this open space. So I object to any condition imposed now at this late stage by the City Council that is inconsistent with the specific plan.
Mr. Thrush, like to respond to that?
Actually, the reference to Section 1203 in the specific plan, we're not proposing to vary that in the specific plan. We're looking for, to the extent that there is a difference in the way building and safety interprets that, and perhaps if it's not an unfair question to pose to Mr. Lara while he's here, we might ask, does building and safety measure from native soil, or do they measure for after a site has been substantially raised?
Mr. Lara, are you ready to answer that question? Did you hear the question?
I only got part of the question, I'm
Can
sorry.
you repeat the question one more time, sir?
The question is, does building and safety measure height from the original surface of the soil, or does it measure from the finished grade of a soil after that site has been significantly raised?
From the aspect of zoning, we measure that from what we call referred to as the finished grade. Finished grade. And so natural grade is measured, if basically the soil is undisturbed and you build a building as is on top. Finished grade implies that, the soil could be built up.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Thrush? Okay. Now, how does that change anything that, I want to understand your reaction to Mr. Resnick's observation.
Yeah, Mr. Resnick may be correct, and that is, if 1203 is interpreted as Mr. Lara just indicated, we may very well need an exception to the specific plan. So if we would still request the 30 feet be measured from grade, but we would not want to be inconsistent with the code. So we would take it in the alternative.
Okay. So let me go through this action, and Mr. Thrush, if I'm inaccurate, because this is all moving now, I want to make sure you clarify for me any changes that is required based on your understanding of your work with the community and the applicant. So we'll start with 11A, a zone change, and Councilor Weiss, this will be the action that we'll take. For 11A, be a zone change, the action would be to deny requested zone changes of RA to R1, approve zone changes from RA to TQRS, on the 4.76 acre site. So that's for 11A. For 11B, deny the appeal, sustain the action of the North Valley Area Planning Commission in approving tentative track 60461-1A, modify conditions of approval incorporating missing conditions and consistency with zone change and division of land and determinations, adopt findings plus environmental report 2004-2834 M&D, recommend and approve tentative track 60461-ZA, I believe, or is that 2A? 2A, incorporating changes. Recommend per Council District 2 changes in zone change, tentative track conditions relative to wildlife corridors and height of structures, which we just spoke to. On the violation issues, I'd like to request that Department of Building and Safety, Grading Division, monitor and confirm all violations on the site are corrected prior to the recordation of the track map. So before we record the track map, have a report back dealing with the monitoring and the status of these violations on the site. That would be the action of this committee.
Okay, council member, there is one question that I had on 11A. There is an ordinance that's before us and that the committee is having a public hearing on, and I guess this is a question for the city attorney, that has dimensions on it right now. So when we get the other ordinance between now and council, I just need to know if what we're doing now would require another public hearing in council.
Jerry Burge, City Attorney's Office. I would defer to the Planning Department, but I do not think that the request for wildlife corridor changes the map for the zone change. It's the same piece of property, and it is now a zone change to RS. It is still that piece of property. I don't think there's any change.
Okay, so the square footage in this case, if it's modified, would not make a change in the ordinance map? Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, Mike Young for the record, Planning Department. I agree with the city attorney. What we're looking at is the land use. And what we'll do is modify the track itself to indicate where that wildlife corridor. And so one of the conditions talking about a revised map, that revised map should reflect that wildlife corridor. Now, in regards to the height, if that was also incorporated, so what you indicated in your motion should also incorporate the changes articulated by the council office.
And those changes we'll see before it reaches council.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Does that answer your question, Barbara?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So that would be the action of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. I'm sorry, but it has been 6 years. In order to cure the dumping issue, as you've heard from my client say, he didn't do it, but it's been done, he's going to need to, ultimately, the solution is grade the site. He's got plans in and permits, but he can't grade the site until the map's going to be recorded, so you put him in a catch-22. May I suggest that the condition on clearing up all the orders to comply be prior to issuance of building permits, rather than recordation of the track map? And
Madam Attorney?
Jerry Burge, City Attorney's Office. That seems like a reasonable request in light of the way a track map and building permits interrelate. I think that's reasonable. And while I have the record here, might I also recommend that you adopt the findings attached to the zone change in item 11A?
Okay. So we will allow for...
You would change that condition or that request, and it's simply a request to Building and Safety, that they monitor and confirm violations, make sure they've all been complied, that there's been compliance prior to issuance of building permits.
We got that, Mr. Lara? Okay.
Yes, and Ms. Greaves wanted to go to council on the 15th, not the 10th, and we would consent to an extension from October 10th to October 15th.
That's fine. Okay, and then we'll also, you made reference to 11A, Madam Attorney?
Yes, Councilman, that you also adopt the findings of the Planning Department for the zone change.
will adopt the findings of the planning department for the zone change. So that'll be the action of this committee. That takes care of 11A and B. That closes this item. Okay. Roberto,
Public comment, Council.
public comment. All right. Several cards. Carmen Iniguez. Somebody wrote down as a representative or a person who lives at 2507 Forest Park Drive, did not leave their name. Noel Weiss, Jose Aguilar, and Reuben Chavez.
Did you get council member, did you get Noah Weiss's public comment card?
We
The one on
have-
13, item
we
13.
didn't have the item before us.
Item 13, he submitted a card.
Okay, we'll add it on when it comes on general comment, please. Ms. Iniguez?
Yes, thank
Hi.
you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Carmen Iniguez, a constituent of CD14, Jose Weezer's district. There are also constituents today from CD1, which is from your district, Mr. Reyes. I'm here today just to listen and learn from the Plan Commission on the items or issues discussed today. I would just like to say to Mr. Weezer and Mr. Reyes that they need to stop sending their representatives, Adele and Guadalupe, to represent them in such pressing issues such as the Northeast Los Angeles Hillside Zone Change, case number CPC 2008-1182-ZC, the new zoning ordinances are the strictest codes in all of Los Angeles. According to the ICO, the affected properties were only supposed to be 700 lots. Now there are 14,000 plus lots in question. Why is that, gentlemen? We'd like to know. Our homes and land are the greatest treasure of the American dream. It is the most valuable asset we have for ourselves and for our family. Please, in the future, do not send your representatives Adele and Guadalupe. Please show up to future meetings. We did not vote them into office. We voted you, Mr. Reyes, and Mr. Weezer to represent our community. I have a message from your constituents regarding the proposed zone change. And basically, it's this: no on the zone change. And by the way, I'm the one that took the pictures on the July 26th at the second public hearing, and it was rather insulting to have a 99-cent store shoebox, Play-Doh, and Lego blocks. I was insulted as a constituent having items and having interns, not professionals, explain such pressing issues. So please, again, I want to put this into the record. Again, thank you for listening to us, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure who lives at 2507 Forest Park Drive, but we need your name.
Sorry for that error.
It's quite all right.
Gardner Compton, and I live on the top of Paradise, in case I don't
can
make
you
it later.
Can you repeat your name one more time?
Gardner Compton, Compton. Like that tacky town in Los Angeles. At any rate, I am on the top of Paradise. Now, before we're talking about the ridge line, appreciation works both ways. I look down on a mass of black tar and ugly air conditioners on roofs. It would seem as though if we're going to require people on the ridge line to have certain aesthetic principles, that it would behoove the city to require that of everyone below as well. There's no reason in the world why we can't have green roofs and green technology today and get rid of some of this blight. And also, there's another issue. If those that are concerned about the ridge line and about the open spaces and so forth, I would urge them to kind of think of a principle that I thought of. If you like it, buy it. I did. I bought my property. Now, I am trying to, with great difficulty with building and safety and so forth, because especially with this new ordinance that is going to be proposed by the rezoning, which was put together by amateurs who know nothing about the situation. The community wasn't conferred with, and we have internationally famous architects and engineers that live in our community. None of the people that prepared this do live in our community, number one. Number two, they aren't professionals. With all due respect, even though it isn't returned, with Gabriela Juarez, this proposal is just so full of flaws, and that I urge you to not even consider it. The community doesn't consider it, and 400 people showed up at one meeting to impress upon you that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. You should know we did put in the books 2 years ago a green rooftop ordinance. So
well, that was the ICO.
That was no. This is different. 2 years ago, we put into the books a green rooftop ordinance. So that's being worked through the process. It's a separate issue, a different track, but we are trying to look at the future by recommending new policies that stimulates green rooftops, just so that you are aware.
Good.
Okay, next is Noel Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, my request is of you that you have the planning department and you have the housing department as per this item. I wouldn't, respectfully, Mr. Reyes, give them the option. I think they should be here to listen to the public. I think if you told them that they should come, they'll have reports. They need to have reports, and if they don't have any, they'll get them after they hear from the people, and you can make them comply. I think that would be in the public interest. Secondly, with regard to, again, the housing department has not, as far as I can tell, followed through. We have this issue, Ms. Goldberg brought it up herself when we did the tenant relocation fee raise, about the need to let tenants in conversions know they have the right to terminate their leases unilaterally when their tract maps are approved. That was something Ms. Goldberg asked for. The people don't know it, Mr. Reyes, and they need to. And we need to have that be made clear. Third, with regard, again, I say this with all due respect, when you're sitting as a judge on these appeals, I think it's fair and appropriate when the appellants come before your committee that you give these appellants a rebuttal, because that's where you basically get your truth. You are able, the appellants are going to say what they say, the applicant's going to say what they say. It's that rebuttal time, even if it's a shorter period of time. The record is better, it'll educate you better, and it'll enable you to do a better job. And again, I say that with all due respect. Fourth, with regard to the monument of the planning failure of the City of Los Angeles, Lincoln Place. We have to get the Ellis Act declarations returned. If we do that, Mr. Reyes, the case will go away. But right now, Mr. Rosendahl is sitting on it doing nothing. We need you to basically be a leader with regard to this issue. AIMCO has abandoned the tract map. It's no longer an issue. Those Ellis Act declarations if the housing department is directed to return them, we can get that resolved. This is important not just for that case, but for all related cases where the housing department sits on this stuff and it's hurting the system. It's diluting and undermining enforcement, and it is wrong, plain and simple. So that's basically my comment with regard to item 13. And if I could just make one final comment with regard just to public comment. The issue as far as SB 1818, we were before Judge McNew last week with the city attorney. We had a settlement conference mandated by CEQA. We sat, the judge was very nice. He gave us an hour and a half. Now, I presume you guys will get some closed session thing, which frankly I think should be an open session, because now it's all out. But nevertheless, we had a settlement conference. The judge basically kept the city in there one-on-one for about 30 minutes, all alone. I think the judge gave it fair consideration. I honestly, and again, am asking that you, the committee, the city council, give consideration to suspending the enactment of that SB 1818 ordinance. The city attorney, I hope, he's represented such to the judge, hopefully they'll get around to it, we come back to you and say, you know what, these are the reasons why we need to do this, these are the reasons why the judge felt that it was appropriate that we give this consideration. I think the man is a fair judge, I think he'll be a good judicial officer on this case, but you know what, we're wasting time, we're losing time. There are very important public policy considerations involved here, and honestly, it's better if we admit that we made a mistake. We're not asking for a lot, but I think in the course of that suspension, you do your environmental review, and we can basically get it done right. You can have everything that you want in terms of your mixed income. We can have everything we want in terms of TOPA potentially. It can all work out fine, but we are wasting that time, and I just offer that again, respectfully, Mr. Reyes, for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is Jose Aguilar and Reuben Chavez.
Okay. Just for the record, this news article, reporter Francisco stated that there were going to be more meetings concerning this ordinance, and I just found out that on the 30th, the planning department did their summary and submitted it to Plum. So there is no more public meetings except the one that Plum will have concerning the Hillside ordinance that's going to be implemented. So I need to know, when is Plum going to have this for a hearing? The public needs to know when it's going to be scheduled for a hearing. Number two, there is strong opposition in the community. The El Cerrito Neighborhood Council, which makes up 80% of this ordinance, has, and I will submit the minutes, that they're opposed to the initial draft of the City of Los Angeles Northeast Los Angeles Hillside zoning change for the following reasons. And I'm going to submit this for the record. Second of all, I'm on the Land Use Committee for Lincoln Heights Neighborhood Council, and I'm going to state here that the Planning Department was invited to attend the Lincoln Heights Neighborhood Council to give us a presentation of the newly elected board. I repeat, newly elected board. They did not show up. They didn't want to show up. And I hold that as contempt to the community. And this was a presentation that our secretary did, and she did her best. The secretary was Ms. Riley. And I think the fact is that if the planning department is hold us, the neighborhood council reps, in contempt and don't even bother to come when we invite them to consult with us concerning the Hillside ordinance, what are you doing? Is this issue being done under the table? What's happening? Why can't you force the planning department to give us a presentation on it? There's newly elected board members that needed to know this information. Second of all, I want to state for the record that there is opposition. There's strong opposition, and this newspaper shows the strong opposition, and we have additional articles coming out concerning, Mr. Carr was actually shoved by one of your planning deputies. That article is in here too. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Obviously to that effect.
Our next speaker is Reuben Chavez.
Good afternoon once again. My name is Reuben Chavez, and I live in Lincoln Heights. I was just recently elected to the board on June 12th of this year, so I'm rather new at this, but I'm very interested in terms of this ordinance. I understand that some of this stuff doesn't apply to the Lincoln Heights area, but we have hills, and I think I heard it in November, you're going to be having it citywide or something, so that will impact us one way or another. We did invite the lady Gabriela for our meeting on this past Thursday, October the 2nd, at the Lincoln Heights Library downstairs, where we normally have our meetings for now. A lot of people in our community are interested in this issue and are somewhat confused. We understand that construction is always going to take place. We're always going to have condos, apartments, houses, and all that go up anywhere in the city, including Lincoln Heights. It's unavoidable. It's called progress. But with these new laws that are coming in, some of the people feel that there's probably enough laws already to impact the hillsides and all of that, and they're somewhat confused with the reasoning of the new laws, and we wanted some clarification from the planning department, and we had this lady, Gabriela, confirmed that she was going to come. I don't have a problem that she didn't show herself, but I wish they would have sent someone in that department to replace her, because maybe she had to be elsewhere. I mean, I understand all of that, but we should have had someone from that department and clear the air for us and take out all the confusion and everything that's in this. I've attended some of the meetings for LA 32, and so I'm very curious about this, and I wish this lady or someone from there should have come. That's all I have to say. Thank you
Mr.
for
Chavez.
your patience.
Thank you. My understanding is that Plum will be hearing this matter. That is a public hearing opportunity as well, sometime in late November. So that's going to be the general target for hearing that specific matter. So I want to make sure that's clear. And there's really nothing to hide. It's a public process. We have a give and take. There's one side that agrees, another side that disagrees, and we try to achieve a balance. And it's pretty much that basic. Thank you. Thank you very much. See no one else here for public comment? This meeting is adjourned.